Hello and welcome back to my channel. It has been a little bit. A lot of things have changed. My channel is going to get demonetized next month. I'm one of the channels that fall into that category, which isn't that big a deal. I hadn't been making any money off of YouTube to begin with. The new conditions that they set up have really sort of made it so that once you would be making money, then they'll start working with you to make money, which kind of makes some sense. And I've been sort of on board with that kind of procedure for a while now. I always thought that that was probably a more responsible way for them to go about it, and probably would stop some of the problems that they have been having in the last year. However, it is annoying because you sort of do sign a contract with them that, hey, once I start making money from you, then all this money that I've sort of built up over time will then be paid back to me. So it does feel like YouTube is sort of breaking a contract that was already in place. So that stings a little bit, but at the same time I do understand why they're doing it. I don't understand why they're not addressing the actual problems they have, because we all know that this change to have the early creators not monetized doesn't actually solve any of their current issues that they've been having the last year, because all of those have stemmed from channels that are vastly more popular and are going to continue to be monetized. So that's a bit annoying. Obviously I have a setup coming along. That's a new change too. I moved back in, so slowly I'll get this sort of the way I want it, but it's a lot better now. And it is the last day of the month, and so for this year I want to read you guys a poem that I have enjoyed reading for the month, and also a poem that I have written that I'm really proud of for each month. Recently I've read a lot of poems that I hadn't read previously myself, but the poem that I chose for today is by, I'm going to say this wrong, Kaye. I found him on Twitter because Sarah Kaye was following him, and I actually started following a whole bunch of poets that Sarah Kaye was following. So I started following Kaye, and he just seemed like such a wonderful person, so finally I went and read some of his poetry, and I really enjoyed this one that I'm going to read for you today. There were a bunch of other poets that I really enjoyed recently, especially poems by Ocean Vuong. I was looking through some of my favorites because Ocean Vuong, of course, just recently won a big award, but a lot of those are a lot longer to read. So I am going to link my favorite poem by Ocean Vuong, which is, let me make sure I have the title right, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, which I think is a really gorgeous poem. But what I'm going to read today is Kaye's My Kingdom for a Murmur of Fanfare, because I thought it was really lovely. It sort of reminded me of Matthew Dickman's style of poetry. Not quite exactly the same, but as I was reading it, I was like, I can hear like murmurs of the same thing, and so I do wonder if they have crossed paths at all, if they have similar teaching, or if they just happen to have similar interests. So, without further ado, this is My Kingdom for a Murmur of Fanfare. It's common to live properly, to pretend you don't feel heat or grief, wave nightly to Mrs. Fuig and Mr. Goggles before diving into your nightcap, before reading yourself a bedtime story or watching your beloved sink to the bottom of a lake, noting his absence in your log. The next day you drop his clothes off at Goodwill like a sack of mail from a warplane, then hobble back to your hovel like a knight moving only in L's. It is comfortable to be alive this way, especially now, but it makes you so vulnerable to shock. You ignore the mortgage and find a falconer's glove in your yard, whole hand still inside, or you arrive home after a long day to discover your children have grown, suddenly hideous and unlovable. What I am trying to say is I think it's okay to accelerate around corners, to grunt back at the mailman and swallow all your laundry quarters. So much of everything is dumb baffle. Water puts out fire. My disease can become your disease. The two hounds will fight over a feather because feathers are strange. All I want is to finally take off my cowboy hat and show you my jeweled horns. If we slow dance, I will ask you not to tug on them, but secretly, I want that very much. I just love that poem. I thought that was really beautiful. Kaye has a new full-length poetry collection that came out last year? Yep, in September. It's called Calling a Wolf a Wolf. So if you're looking for a new poetry book, I have not read that whole collection yet, but I am enjoying this poet, so I recommend that to you. And now I'll go ahead and read my favorite poem that I have written for this month of January. It's been kind of a cold and rainy month now that we've been back in Washington. I love the rain. The cold has been a little bit much. I have not titled this poem yet. Recently, I've been getting a lot of poetry ideas as I'm falling asleep, and so since my phone is right by the bed and I don't have to turn on the light to use it, I've been texting myself snippets of poems, and then in the morning I wake up and read those and then copy them down into my journal. And so that is how this poem came about. This one I texted myself almost all of this poem one night as I was supposed to be falling asleep. So it doesn't have a title yet, but here we go. Step up on the tightrope with me. There are ways to keep our balance, hold stiff against the wind, suspended. We are barely bodies on a string of our own making. The night air drifts across the wire, and we are tiny and infinite. Under lights that have loomed for centuries, we contain the power to keep steady on a thin line, to battle the obvious fate and reach across. We are a multitude of possibility. Step out with me. Keep the balance in your core and flex your spine. The stars have since cast light on wanderers whose feats were more impossible than ours. Brace with me against the breeze. Holding hands, step out. So that is my poem for January. January's just been full of a lot of changes. Excitement in the new year. I've been doing a lot of baking. I know hardly anyone watched my Christmas video, probably turned off by my terrible singing, but I baked bread in that one, and I've been just doing a lot of baking recently. I've been enjoying that. I've been neglecting writing a bit. I've been writing poetry. I've been doing my poem a week. If anyone else is doing a poem a week, let me know, because I think I'm enjoying this more than the sort of rush of doing 100 poems in 100 days. I don't feel like I'm writing just for the sake of writing. That was a really good exercise, but I think with this one I'm more sitting with the poems and writing better poems. Overall, all of the poems that I've written I've been pretty proud of for this month. And then it's about 4 poems a month, right? Yeah. 4 poems a month. And I'm pretty confident in all of them. Of course, I read you my favorite one. Let's just keep up some light and positivity, spread some poetry. That is one of the reasons that I ultimately decided to choose Kaye. He's such a lovely person, but he's really big on spreading poetry and on appreciating poets. Really good person and a really good poet, and I'm really glad that I've started following him and reading his poetry. And I believe that is it. Happy 2018, everybody! I will for sure see you next month, and hopefully sooner than that. Bye!